received a rapturous welcome. One by one, MPs rose to issue their encomiums. "I always knew he had lead in his pencil," gushed Stuart Jackson, a serial rebel. Another compared Mr. Juncker to the Luftwaffe, and Mr. Cameron, by implication, to the Royal Air Force, overlooking that the RAF did at least succeed. Brussels bashing usually goes down well with Tory backbenchers, but this was about more than just the unloved Luxembourger. A general election is due next May, and previously truculent MPs like Mr. Jackson are rallying. After 4 years of fractiousness in the Tory party, the tribal spirit has returned. That will boost the party's election machine, which needs all the help it can get. It only takes a glance at GDP figures to understand the turnaround. Britain is expected to grow faster than any other large advanced economy this year. Credit for this is flowing to the Conservatives. According to YouGov, a polling firm, their rating on the economy is the best it has been since they took office, and improving. George Osborne, the Chancellor and an ever more dominant figure in the party, has seen his once abysmal personal standing soar too. The contrast between his budgets of 2012 and 2014, the first a political disaster, the second a triumph, are held up as evidence of the party's resurgence. Some Tories are rightly concerned that the recovery is not reaching people's wallets, a charge that Labour makes incessantly. Still, wages are starting to creep up, and unemployment has tumbled. When on July 1st Ed Miliband, Labour's leader, claimed that the jobs created were mostly in booming London, Conservatives gleefully put him right. The opposite is now true. According to the Office for National Statistics, 4 in 5 new posts are outside the capital. This points to a second cause for Tory optimism, the state of the opposition. As his lead over the Tories has narrowed, so rumblings about Mr. Miliband's leadership have become louder. On July 1st, Lord Glassman, a former advisor, accused him of lacking direction and offering mediocrity. Conservative MPs are confident that once voters start taking a closer look at Mr. Miliband, they will reach the same conclusion. They greeted him with a sarcastic cheer when he rose at Prime Minister's questions on July 2nd. At the same time as Labour is losing discipline, we seem to be gaining it, says David Skelton of Renewal, a Tory pressure group. He has a point. Unlike Labour, the party has a clear, simple electoral pitch. It has cut welfare spending, immigration and taxes, and wants to continue doing so. Tory MPs may roll their eyes at the slogans they must parrot, long-term economic plan and hard-working people, but the result is an impression of crispness and consistency. Those who stray from the script receive phone calls from Linton Crosby, an Australian spin doctor, sternly reminding them that they should participate, not commentate. The carrot of a cabinet reshuffle in the coming weeks, dangled over the ambitious for months now, is another reason to toe the line. Order reigns. It was not meant to be this way. The populist right-wing UK Independence Party, or UKIP, came first in the European election on May 22nd, nudging the Tories into a dismal third place. But the expected recriminations did not materialise, especially as the Tories stormed to victory in a by-election in Nottinghamshire 2 weeks later. Their campaign was slick, concentrating on jobs and public services, rather than UKIP's preferred ground of immigration and Europe. The party bussed in young activists to knock on doors, lured more by the prospect of nocturnal carousing than of canvassing voters, it was said. But the by-election result disguises broader troubles. It is one thing to flood a single seat with resources, quite another to run a national election campaign. They may be catching up, but the Conservatives still lag Labour in the polls. According to Lord Ashcroft, A Tory peer and pollster, they are slightly further behind in marginal seats, yet they need to be 4 or 5 points ahead nationally just to be the largest party, he reckons, and more than that to have a majority. Is this possible? To advance, the party especially needs to squeeze the UKIP vote, now in double digits. In the latest YouGov survey, 14% of respondents who voted Tory in 2010 said they planned to back the insurgent party, which is also picking off Labour and Liberal Democrat voters who might otherwise vote Conservative. Still, as Peter Kellner of YouGov notes, the fundamentals are on the Tories' side. The party's task is to convert its strengths on issues like the economy into votes. Mr. Kellner reckons that it can win back defectors to UKIP by focusing on their living standards and making the election a choice between the two prospective prime ministers. Most UKIPers prefer Mr. Cameron to Mr. Miliband. For much of the current term, the Conservative Party has seemed cartoonishly ungovernable. MPs were furious at the strictures of coalition, rebelled more frequently than those in any previous post-war parliament, routinely aired their grievances in public, and in some cases plotted Mr. Cameron's downfall. All that has faded. The tribe has regrouped. That may not last, but for now, at least, it seems willing to be led. Britain. Carbon capture. Pipe dreams. A fresh effort to store pollutants underground.
For more than 30 years, Peterhead Power Station has churned out electricity from a windswept spot on the northeast coast of Scotland. Its chimney is a familiar landmark for strollers on Aberdeen's chilly beach. Yet soon the ageing gas-fired plant could host a crucial experiment. Engineers from Shell, an oil firm, and SSE, an energy company, plan to add technology that will capture the carbon dioxide which billows from Peterhead's furnace and store it in a depleted gas field more than a mile beneath the North Sea. That could cut its emissions by up to 90%, making Peterhead by far the cleanest gas plant in the world. Peterhead is one of 2 preferred bidders in a government contest that aims to kickstart Britain's adoption of carbon capture and storage, or CCS, technology. The other pet project is a proposed coal-fired plant at Drax Power Station in Yorkshire, which will pipe its pollutants about 50 miles to the coast before trapping them in rocks beneath the waves. Yet politicians have been soliciting similar proposals since 2007, without bringing any to fruition. Abortive efforts at Peterhead go back even further. Boosters hope this latest crop will buck a sorry trend. The rewards could be great. CCS is one of a very few ways to clean up industries such as steelmaking or chemicals. Fossil fuel power stations fitted with carbon capturing kit would provide an unusually flexible source of green power. Solar panels and wind farms work only in the right weather, and nuclear reactors cannot respond quickly to changes in demand. These benefits would bring savings. Carbon capture could be lopping £30 billion, that's $51 billion, off Britain's annual energy bill by 2050, says the Energy Technology Institute, a government and industry research body. The International Energy Agency, an intergovernmental outfit, reckons CCS will have to deliver 1/6 of the emissions cuts required to limit the damage done by climate change, and that foregoing it would raise costs by 40%. Britain is well placed to cash in. Its wealth of underwater engineers will need new ways to keep busy as the North Sea's fields run dry. A steady supply of carbon could be useful to roughnecks who are experimenting with techniques that use the gas to squeeze more oil from mature wells. And the country's deep aquifers and depleted reservoirs could probably hold 100 years' worth of emissions. That makes slow progress all the more frustrating. In May, MPs on the Climate Change Select Committee complained that government dithering had led to a lost decade for CCS in Britain. Money is part of the problem. Boffins say energy from the first CCS plants could cost £150 to £200 per megawatt hour, 4 times the current wholesale price of power, and more expensive even than offshore wind farms. European laws that oblige Britain to invest heavily in renewables are diverting resources away from CCS, says Judith Shapiro, an industry spokesperson. Yet the government is digging deep to make sure its latest efforts pay off. In 2007, it put aside £1 billion to help fund the capital costs of some CCS projects, not least the huge expense of laying new pipelines over land. Lately, it has also promised ongoing subsidies of the type given to renewables at a rate to be agreed. Bosses at Peterhead and at Drax say that next year they hope to make a final decision on whether or not to press ahead. Pessimists say that a few pilot projects will not make an industry, even if the technology proves viable. Some fret that runners-up in the government's competition will run out of money while it mulls what subsidies to offer. Others warn of bottlenecks without more efforts to identify storage sites. One big uncertainty is how the public will react when plans for carbon capture are better known. Though engineers have been cramming carbon underground for several years, notably in Norway, the idea could still spark alarm. That would not easily go back in the bottle.
Britain. Funding the NHS. Beloved, beleaguered. The NHS faces another funding crisis. It needs efficiencies as well as cash. Britain's health service is no stranger to crises, but lately predictions of a particularly big hole in the budget have plagued Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, and Simon Stevens, the new boss of the National Health Service, or NHS. Sources at NHS England told the BBC on June 18th that there was a gap of around £2 billion, that's $3.4 billion, in funding for the fiscal year ending in 2016. Monitor, the health regulator, predicts a shortfall of £30 billion by 2021. Many countries have seen their healthcare budgets strained as a result of the financial crisis, but the challenge facing the NHS is particularly daunting. It is already struggling to find $20 billion in savings, which the government demands by 2015. Doctors responsible for primary care, known in Britain as general practitioners or GPs, warn that squeezing budgets in one part of the NHS can raise pressure on another. A study by Imperial College in London found that in 2012, more than 6 million visits to emergency wards in hospitals